The Earth has set new high temperature records according to the latest reports from various world meteorological organizations. This video is going to take a look at just how extreme the temperature conditions have become. This map, published by NOAA, shows the significant climate events in June of 2016. You will note there are 8 red circles with a thermometer in the middle of them, which indicate a record high temperature has been set for that area. There is only one blue circle with a thermometer in it, indicating a low temperature, and this 8-to-1 ratio has been typical of the high to low temperature records that have been set over the last few years. We could take a more detailed look at this with the following map. We have here a map showing global temperatures with a 500 square kilometer resolution. Dark red pixels here are record high temperatures, dark blue pixels here are record low temperatures. And as you can see at a glance, there are far more red pixels than there are blue pixels. This indicates a warming globe. June of 2016 was 0.62 degrees above the 20th century average. It is the 40th straight June with above average temperatures. So if you're under 40, you have never experienced a June that has had temperatures that are equivalent to the 20th century average or below. It beat the previous record holder, 2015, by 0.04 degrees, which given so many measuring stations around the globe is quite a large margin. And this is despite the fact that El Nino is subsiding. If you look here in the Eastern Pacific, you'll see that there's a swathe of light pink pixels. These last month were red, showing that the temperature has dropped in that area. So we're still setting records despite the fact that El Nino is weakening, which is an amazing fact in and of itself. Well, let's just see how hot it has been. Back in the beginning of 2014, we had some fairly warm months. January was the 4th warmest, February was the 8th warmest, March was the 7th warmest, and April was the 6th warmest. But this was before the El Nino started to set up. In the next 4 months, you can see that the temperature started to approach record levels, with May being the 2nd warmest and July and August being the 3rd warmest. But at the end of the year, when El Nino had intensified, we had September, October and December setting new records. That made 2014 the warmest year on record. 2015 continued that trend. We set a new record in March, for example, with January and February both being the 2nd warmest on record. The next 4 months were amazing. All 4 of them set new records. And again, the last 4 months of the year did the same. This made 2015 the warmest year on record and 2014 the 2nd warmest year on record. The first 6 months of 2016 have continued this trend. There are the 14 straight months of record high temperatures. This means that at the moment, at least, 2016 is heading to become the warmest year on record, replacing 2015. And now with El Nino weakening, that may not in fact be the case, but I think it's certainly going to beat out 2014. So 2016 is either going to be the warmest year on record or the 2nd warmest year on record. Well, just how significant is this 14 straight months of record temperatures? It is the longest streak in the modern record. There's a very low probability of this being a random effect. In fact, you could go out and buy a lottery ticket today, win the lottery, and then go out next week, buy a lottery ticket with the same numbers and win it again, and do that several times to equal the probability of this being a random effect. In the last month, there have been over 6,500 high temperature records set, with only 1,900 low temperature records set. For this to be a stable climate, those two numbers should be statistically the same, and clearly they're not. The fact that there's more high temperature than low temperature records being set means that the planet is warming rapidly. One measure of how much the globe is warming is the amount of sea ice, and sea ice is in retreat. In the Arctic, we have the smallest extent of sea ice in June on record. You can see it here. It's well below any previous figures that have been gathered. In the Antarctic, where the sea ice for the last 3 years has been well above average, now is below average. So even there we're beginning to see the effects of the warming that we've had for the last few years. The American Meteorological Society puts out a weekly report on climate and weather issues, and I've gleaned a few items that might be of interest to you. Do you ever wonder about climate models and all the fuss that's made about how accurate or inaccurate they are? Well, there's a new book available online for free that you can download called Demystifying Climate Models. It's quite good, and there's no equations in it or anything of that sort. It just explains what they are and how they work. I can highly recommend it for anybody who's really inquisitive about climate. We've set a new record in that fact there have been no hurricanes in the Gulf for over 1,000 days, although that record has now just been ended by the appearance of the recent hurricane that just hit Belize. There's forecast that the drought over the northeast could last for many months, perhaps even years. The temperature in the Kuwait and Iraq reached 54 degrees centigrade, about 129 degrees Fahrenheit, a record in the Eastern Hemisphere. And something I can attest to personally, there have been more and more nighttime temperatures above 80 degrees in the Washington DC area. And as you can see, that's been increasing quite significantly over the last few years, and last night was no exception. Here are some pictures that should worry you about global warming. This is a picture of at the top of the Greenland ice cap. This is an area that normally doesn't melt at all, and yet you see these large lakes forming as meltwater accumulates. This water often will find its way down through cracks to under the ice cap, which helps lubricate the glaciers as they go into the sea, so it's increasing the flow of glaciers into the oceans, which is of course in turn increasing sea level. To support that, you can measure the amount of ice that's in the Greenland ice cap. And over the last 15 years, it has lost 3.5 trillion tons of land ice. That's equivalent to 200 cubic kilometers of ice every year. Here is an old friend. This is the global temperature anomaly as measured by NOAA over the last 130 years. As you can see, the temperature has been rising fairly rapidly over the last 50 or so years. But you could say, oh, that recent peak is due to the El Nino, and to some extent you're right. However, the last El Nino of the current size was back in 1998. And you can see that the temperature has increased by 0.4 degrees or more since that equivalent El Nino event. This would actually indicate that temperatures are rising faster than we thought they were before, not slower. And the cause of this? Increasing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases and aerosols, which are not shown here, but all of them are increasing to some extent or another. You can see now that we're over 400 parts per million in the concentration of carbon dioxide, and that's an increase over pre-industrial levels of nearly 50%. On the right we have the carbon dioxide record over the last 800,000 years, and you can see that the maximum up until the present time has been about 300, but more generally about 270 or so. We're now over 400. Now, I had an argument the other day with somebody about increasing sea levels. They were arguing some nonsense about tide gauge indicating that sea level was actually dropping and the satellites being inaccurate. Well, this is a combination of both the tide gauge and the satellite data. So there should be very little problem with this. But the issue that he was really bringing up was it constant rate or was it accelerating? Now, you could sort of draw a straight line through there, but there is a slight bow to it. But just how much of it is accelerating? Well, let's take the first 40 years here and put a straight line through it, fit a straight line through it. And you can see there's a particular slope. Take the next 40 years and do the same thing. then see whether the slope of the first is greater than the second or vice versa. And you can see that the second slope in fact is steeper. Now let's take the next 40 years and do the same thing and continue the previous one, and you can see yet again that the latest slope is much steeper than the previous one. You might even argue the last 15 years has been steeper yet again. So I think it's definitely accelerating, which is a very worrying feature. So the 1 meter estimate of sea level change by the end of the century is probably a significant underestimate. So what can we conclude from all of this? Well, first of all, the Earth is warming. New temperature records are set every month, and that is a very worrying feature, particularly when you get 14 months of record temperatures in a row. This seems to be primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels, and that means we must transition to cleaner energies as fast as we possibly can, lest our climate get completely out of hand. The burning of fossil fuels is damaging our environment not just by increasing the temperature, but in many other ways as well, so they're very undesirable. And we have to transition away from them soon anyway, because some of them, particularly oil, is running out. So that's it for today. Until next time, bye.